Watch the ride.
Hey everybody, hope you're all doing right out there. So yes, my opinion is that we're going to see a jump in motorcycle prices that may affect the bottom end more than the top end in the next couple of years. Now I'm going to have to explain a few things along the way to explain why I'm making this educated guess, but I do also need to point out first, as a disclaimer, that everything I'm saying here is just my opinion and it is based on things I have been told by other people which may be wrong or may no longer be true. So I'm claiming none of this is fact, it is just my opinion and it's based on things I've heard. Just before I get into it, just want to point out I've got about 7 of my calendars remaining. I've got a 10% sale off of all the things on my Etsy store, links in the description. They're the last ones that there are, so please do grab them and help support this channel. Right, I'm going to go on with this because it's cold in here. So there's a few things we need to cover like from the beginning. So what are Euro laws? Euro laws are a set of rules which are put in place that manufacturers of motorcycles and cars have to abide by and make sure that their car or motorcycle fits within. I must also point out here that I know people will say, but Spicy, we're not in the European Union anymore, so why would this affect us? Because we are going to keep getting all the Euro changes. We're going to keep accepting them in this country because it makes more sense for the manufacturers to make them for that giant group of people rather than just little us over here with like a million bikes on the road. We are always going to follow those laws. So who is it that decides those laws? Well, basically the European government put them in power, but they take consultation from heads of business, you know, in the industry, people who make things like motorcycles, and they talk to them about what they think are the steps that they can both achieve and what's good for the future and what's needed for safety and stuff like that. So they put forward their ideas to the lawmakers and the lawmakers make it law. Not always exactly what they say, but there is some facsimile of what they're saying there. Now, as I mentioned, the people who suggest the laws are heads of companies and people within these areas of manufacture. From what I've seen, it's actually relatively true, is that the group of people that make those suggestions is highly connected with BMW and previous BMW people who work with them and investors, also people from Bosch and companies like that. So you've got these leading people in manufacture and related things that are putting forward their suggestions to the lawmakers who put the laws forward. They become our Euro laws, and then all motorcycle manufacturers who want to sell a bike within that area are going to have to comply with those rules. Now in 2020, when Euro 5 came in, you may remember that the cost of bikes, particularly lower bikes like 125s and things, went up quite a bit, particularly if they were like Chinese. That's because they had to comply with the Euro 5 law that required them to have ABS systems on their bikes. Correction, actually, ABS was made mandatory by Euro 4 in 2017, not Euro 5. However, the point still stands. So, this is where it gets all a little bit, you know, conspiratorial, and you have to think about why were these things done. At the time Euro 5 was brought in, the big manufacturers had already had ABS systems on their bikes, and remember that Bosch make most of the ABS systems for everything, as well as tons of stuff, you know, in BMW cars and like that. Sensors and all sorts of bits are going to be made by Bosch. You know, it would be mutually beneficial for them if they have both a solution and then they create a problem, because, you know, if they make it a law that you need this part and we sell the part, well, you've got to buy the part. But this disadvantaged Chinese manufacturers of motorcycles and other manufacturers aside from the big ones because they didn't have the money to do that. So the options they were given was either put ABS on your bike, like the rest of us have already been doing for ages, and we don't have to make any changes, or you can put linked brake systems on anything if it's under 125cc, which is why you saw the implementation of linked braking systems on Chinese 125s, but you'll notice all the Japanese ones had proper ABS systems because they're working with the same people, you know, Bosch and everyone's there, and they've got the price of those bikes allows for flexibility of adding extra parts on without affecting the end price too much. Do remember, of course, that no 125cc, Japanese brand or not, is made in Japan. In fact, very few bikes are made in Japan. They are mostly made in China and Malaysia and India and places like that. And even some of the Hondas, for instance, are made in factories just up the road from where, for instance, Lexmoto's bikes are made. Let's not get into the argument of, well, they've got better quality control. Have you ever been to the factory? I know people who have. Let's just leave that side of it there. But the point is, just know that because the Chinese bikes didn't have the budget to have the ABS systems. They put link brake systems on, which meant you ended up with a crappy brake system in comparison, and you end up paying more money for it, which also brought the cost of the Chinese bikes closer to the now better equipped Japanese bikes. This has actually changed around in recent years with companies like Zontes who do have proper ABS systems and stuff like this, and the prices of the bikes are still quite a bit lower than the Japanese offerings, and they've put their prices through the roof anyway. I can't believe that like a R125 is like no, it was £6,000, wasn't it? When we saw in a recent video. £6,000 for a 125? I think 600s was £7,500 when I first started biking. So you can see how there is possibly a conspiracy here that where BMW and Bosch are working together to make rules which then to their own end are better for them and put Chinese bike manufacturers at a disadvantage. Were I to hear of something like this happening again, I might be suspicious that the same thing might happen. Well, this is the entire point of this video. I saw that Motorcycle News had interviewed some head guy from Bosch at the Milan bike show. Well, he said how he'd like to see all motorcycles fitted with a traction control system. Now, there's something we need to point out here. Again, like with the ABS brakes versus linked brakes, basically two types of traction control. One of them is an advanced, developed, good but expensive version, and the other is a make-do because I've got to comply and it ain't great. So the way it works is if you have a bike like this, which is fuel injected, but it still uses a cable to pull the throttle, then the only way that this bike could do traction control is by cutting the fueling or cutting the ignition, so the engine actually dies for a moment. If you have a fly-by-wire throttle, or a throttle which doesn't actually have a cable, it's just a potentiometer, as it were, or a switch, with an electrical cable sending a signal down to the bike, that you can adjust what happens in the middle of there, because you're not physically holding anything open. The bike can't ignore where my hand is, but a fly-by-wire throttle can ignore where your hand is. So when a fly-by-wire throttle traction control system kicks in, it tends to be a lot more smoother and gradual, and not as jumpy and jerky as the cheaper just cut the engine for a minute versions that you're going to get on something with a less developed fueling system and throttle. Now, as you may know, lots of the large manufacturers are pushing towards having fly-by-wire throttles, but you're not going to find those on the cheaper bikes yet because it's a much more expensive system. This is old and developed. It doesn't need any more working to it. It's cheap. So my hypothesis, my opinion as to why I think we're going to see a jump in motorcycle prices in the next couple of years is because Euro 4 came in 2017, Euro 5 came in 2020. Now there was a big gap between Euro 3 and Euro 4, but they're pushing more and more of these as we go more eco-friendly and safer and safer and safer, and all the rules that have ever been made have been for our safety. No other reason. So when it's been 3 years since the last change, so we're likely to get one in the next couple of years, and you see one of the head people from Bosch saying how they'd like to get traction control on everything, and you know that Bosch and BMW and all that are the people that help suggest the Euro laws, and it would be beneficial to them were it, that people had to fit these systems to their bikes, which Bosch happened to make, and advantages the higher brands that have already had this for a while, and disadvantages the cheaper brands. You can see a facsimile with the link brakes, and that's why I think in the next couple of years we will see Euro 6 come in, and one of the requirements is going to be all motorcycles required to have traction control. So the bigger ones that have already got it are fine, and the smaller ones that haven't got it are going to have to scramble, put a crappy system on top just to cover that, and it's going to end up adding to the price of the bikes. Now, as I say, this is all just my opinion. There is no definite fact to any of this, and I don't know for sure. And it does sound quite conspiratorial, but if you actually have been told these things along the way by people who would know about these things and have been involved directly in the industry, and you see how it worked for Euro 5 with anti-lock brakes and link brakes, it's not a huge mental leap to see Euro 6 having a fixed traction control requirement. Now, whether that is going to be put on 125s or not is another thing, because of course a lot of you are going to say, what are those sparrows doing? I don't know if you can hear them. You're going to say, does a 125cc bike even need traction control? Well, according to Bosch, it actually would reduce accidents by 30%. And they're saying it's totally unnecessary to have these people coming off because giving too much throttle. 30% of crashes could be removed by just enforcing that they have traction control systems. I don't think that happens on 125s as much, but they do have enough power in cold and wet conditions to, you know, lose the back end in a corner or someone gets, you know, overzealous on the throttle. Yes, if they have traction control, that's probably going to help them, but it also means they don't get to learn. I mean, one of the ways I learned to be, you know, more confident on a bike in wet conditions and muddy conditions was by riding a supermoto and a 125cc with road tyres in mud, get used to the bike sliding around. And then now I might be on this bike, go around a corner, too much throttle, the back end steps out, you don't even think about it, and you just carry on. In the more early days, you did have to get a pair of trousers when you got home, but nowadays, I'm sure a lot of you will agree, you know, you'll have moments, and whereas in your younger days that would have left you, you know, with a big heart rate, and now nothing. And then you start wondering, is there something wrong with me? Because I've just very nearly come off and I'm not even got a slightly raised pulse or adrenaline or anything, but it's because your brain's taken over because you're that experienced. Tangent, back to the point. I think they could try and make 125s have to have these systems because they don't need to be that complicated, but they would mean that they would be more expensive and it would disadvantage the Chinese brands and the cheaper brands, which is obviously something they would like to do. Because as I've pointed out over the past 12 years or so, when I started out with a Chinese bike, they were never perfect, and they're still not perfect, and they're now a bit expensive, really, to get the good ones, but they're still cheaper than the alternatives, and they're proving themselves to be very reliable. But the upward trend of Chinese bikes being better and being used more has been proven to be right, considerably. I mean, just look at the 125s out there, you see way more Chinese bikes. Well, I do in this area anyway. And besides the fact that they're all made in China anyway, so... Of course, I may well be wrong, because this may be based on information that's not true, but time will tell. But my prediction is in 2024, we may hear talk of it. 2025, it might come in, maybe 2026. We will get a new Euro 6 for motorcycles, and I think it will include traction control for everybody, because if Bosch is talking about it now, they're going to keep pushing on it. They want it. I mean, maybe they won't get it through on this one, but they would get it through later. But if they want it, they tend to get what they want because it's beneficial to get what they want, because then they get to sell this thing. So, you know, it's like that old trope of, I have a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, but if I make a problem, then my solution will sell. Now, I'm not saying that traction control is a solution to a problem no one ever had, because clearly it saves lives. But, you know, as a side note, most traction control systems work by using the ABS ring. If you have a bike with ABS, if you don't know what I'm talking about here, watch my recent videos about how does ABS work, and also watch my videos about auto blippers and quick shifters, because this is all related, because it all comes down generally to that ring on your brake disc with holes in it and a sensor, and it notes if the wheel is spinning faster than it's expecting, you know, if it's losing traction, etc., etc. Traction control and ABS use the same thing. The fly-by-wire throttle, the benefit of having that is you have better traction control, but you can also then have an auto blipper. As I say, if you watch those videos, this will all link up and you'll understand how important that little ring can actually be and how the throttle can change what the bike can do. It's basically because you're going from an adapted mechanical system to a fully electrical system. Well, there we go. Prediction has been made. Thank you very much for watching. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you're new here. And if you'd like to help support this channel, you can do that through Patreon, like the wonderful people at the end of this video. Or if you join Patreon, your name will go on the end of every video while you're a valid patron. Remember, there's a 10% sale on everything at my Etsy store. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.